I-9 compliance and documentation requirements, enforcement trends, including immigration audits and investigations, and provide you with tools to help you navigate complex immigration issues. So we want to thank you all for taking the time to join us today. My name is Isaiah Green, and I will be your moderator for today's session. I serve as Assistant Deputy Director and Central California Regional Advisor within the Office of the Small Business Advocate, where we support all 4.2 million small businesses in either starting, scaling, or exiting your venture. So a few quick housekeeping notes. We will have time for Q&A at the end of this presentation, so feel free to drop your questions in the Q&A box as we go. Also, today's session is being recorded and slides will be shared after the presentation. So with that being said, I'm going to introduce, and I'm excited to introduce, our star lineup of experts who will be sharing valuable information today and the resources in order to help you stay ahead. So I want to introduce Odette Ford, who is the Manager of Immigrant Integration Initiatives within the Governor's Office of Business and Economics. Bianca Saad, who is General Counsel in Labor and Employment with California Chamber of Commerce. Raitu Estes, who is Directing Attorney, Community Development Project, and also with Public Counsel. Sophia Wrench, who is Equal Justice Works Fellow with Public Counsel as well. And so with that being said, I'd like it to pass it to Odette for some opening remarks.
Thank you, Isaiah. Thank you all for joining today. We're so delighted to be able to have this timely webinar today. Again, my name is Odette Ford. I serve as the Immigrant Integration Initiatives Manager here at the Governor's Office of Business and Economic Development, short for GO-Biz. I oversee statewide efforts to advance economic inclusion for immigrant communities here at GO-Biz. Just as a background, GO-Biz serves as the state of California leader for job growth, economic development, and business assistance efforts. Our office is engaged in coordinating resources and technical assistance for small business in preparation for immigration enforcement that's been happening around the state of California and evolving federal policies that are impacting small businesses. I just want to elevate and highlight that California is home to obviously approximately 4.2 million small businesses, and out of those businesses, 40% of those businesses are immigrant owned, and about 32.7% of the state's workforce is immigrant, and 40% of those are entrepreneurs. That's a lot of numbers, but I just want to elevate that to kind of share that the recent actions of enforcement will impact small businesses in different states of the area. It could be your neighbor, right? It could be your local market store or convenience store or restaurant. And so we just want to ensure you have timely information so that as a business owner, you're prepared to prepare for any type of audits or any type of enforcement to keep your workers safe and your businesses safe. I'm gonna pass it over to Bianca, also to share some opening remarks.
Thank you, Odette, and good afternoon, everyone. Thank you so much for joining us today. We do continue to be very excited about this partnership with CalChamber and CalOSBA and GO-Biz to provide small businesses with education, resources, and guidance for navigating the complexities of California employment law. Part of CalChamber's mission is really just to help California businesses, particularly small businesses, of course, to understand what the requirements are and how to comply, and for us to be a resource. So we're very excited about this partnership today, and in particular, very excited about this timely topic that we have for today on immigration compliance. So with that, I know everyone's eager to get to the meat and potatoes of today's presentation. So I will now turn it over to the Public Counsel to get us started.
Thank you. Thanks everyone for being here today. My name is Ritu Mahajan. I'm the Directing Attorney of Public Counsel's Community Development Project. And as folks have mentioned previously, we wanted to do this webinar at this time because we know that there is a lot of fear and anxiety in the community about immigration enforcement activities that are occurring, throughout the state. most recently in the LA region, and we want to make sure that we are arming small business owners with information so that they understand what their rights and responsibilities are in the event that such activity occurs at their work sites. Also, just naming that we're going to be covering quite a bit of information today, and you will get the PowerPoint slides after the webinar, and we'll hold time for questions at the end. But just naming that the information we're going to be sharing today, can be hard to hear and, can cause some folks to feel emotional. And so, I understand that. And I know some folks on this webinar may have more lived experience with immigration agents than, Sophia and I do. But we're really happy that you're here today. And we are a resource to help you as you navigate this time. Next slide, please. Oh, yeah. So, also just naming that the presentation today is intended as a general overview. It's for informational purposes only. It's not to be construed as providing you with legal advice. But as I said, if you do need legal assistance for your small information on how you can access public counsel services. And just a brief overview of Public Counsel for those that may not be familiar. We're based in Los Angeles. We are a nonprofit public interest law firm dedicated to advancing civil rights and racial and economic justice, as well as to amplifying the power of our clients through comprehensive legal advocacy. And on the agenda today, these are some of the key issues we're going to be discussing. So we're going to talk about recent trends and insights, general constitutional rights that we all have, regardless of our immigration status, tips on data storage and keeping information confidential. We are going to discuss I-9 requirements, audits, and raids. We are going to discuss how you can try to identify federal immigration agents that may show up at your workplaces. We're also going to talk about the public versus private space, how to implement policies that your staff or that you can follow if agents come to your facility. We're going to share how you can understand the different types of warrants and subpoenas that exist, and provide some tips on how you can care for your staff after a raid or audit. Next slide, please. Okay. So I just wanted to start with just a baseline for all of us to have. We all have rights under the Constitution, regardless of our immigration status. We have the right to stay silent. We have the right to ask for identification. We have the right to document and record what's happening. We also have the right to deny entry. So to deny immigration agents entry into private spaces if they do not have a judicial warrant. We also have a right to ask them if they have any documentation. And we all have the right to be represented by a lawyer in criminal proceedings. Next slide, please. Okay, I'm going to pass it to Sophia to take us through the next few slides.
Thank you, Ritu. Hi, everyone. My name is Sophia Wrench. I'm an attorney with Public Counsel. We want to talk about how you can prepare your business before you are visited by ICE or any kind of law enforcement. You want to know what information your business currently has stored, what information is confidential that's stored, or that is potentially personal information of clients or customers. And also examine what protections you have in place already to protect that data. So the first question you need to ask yourself is whether your business has a specific purpose for collecting or retaining that information. So that means if you don't have a specific business purpose to have that information, you should think about either collecting it in a different way or not asking for that information, and also think about destroying the information that you currently have on file to best protect your business's privacy and the privacy of your clients and customers. So first, think about what information you're already collecting. Are you collecting residency information? Are you collecting somebody's social security number, tax identification numbers? And where is that information stored? So if you do have a specific business purpose for it, think about whether there's another way that you can access the same information that is potentially getting less sensitive information on your files. So for example, if you need proof of residency, instead of asking for a passport, can you ask for a utility bill or something else that proves that person's address? If you do need to ask for it, how long do you need to keep it? There are certain rules in place, I know, for certain businesses for how long they need to retain documents. For example, 7 years for attorney documents. But if you don't need to keep it after that customer is no longer working with you, think about how you're destroying that data. And have a policy in place for how often you are examining your personal files in order to make sure that you are regularly destroying data that is no longer relevant, that you don't need to keep, and that is potentially sensitive. You should also think about how your documents are protected, both in person and online. For example, online, are you using softwares that are encrypted and secure to secure that data? And if you have physical files, are they locked up? Are they behind a locked door? You should also have written policies that cover the data retention and disclosure. And Public Counsel has an example of this for nonprofits that is also applicable for some small businesses on our website. And then lastly, you should think about doing regular digital security trainings for your staff to cover things like not saving documents to your personal computer, not saving documents or sending sensitive files via text message, and also about password protecting your files and recognizing phishing emails to maximize digital security. And the reason that we're doing all of this is in order to protect the disclosure of information so that you're not putting any of your company's data at risk in the case that there is a request from any government entities for this data through an audit or a raid. Another thing to know before you start interacting with ICE is what they actually look like. And we use ICE as a proxy a lot of times to encompass a wide variety of agencies that are all within the U.S. Department of Homeland Security. ICE stands for Immigration and Customs Enforcement, and it's also within another agency of the federal government called ERO, or Enforcement and Removal Operations. And those folks are the ones who are in charge of detaining and deporting individuals. Those folks typically wear dark vests that will say ICE Police or ERO. And they sometimes are also found in plain clothes, meaning that they're not in uniform. They are required by law to carry identification with them, but they're not required by law to show that to you. It is a best practice to ask them to identify themselves. Similarly, for their vehicles, sometimes you will find they have white Suburbans or SUVs that have a green or a white or a blue stripe on them. But also many times you'll also find that they are in unmarked vehicles, such as the one in the photo found here. FPS is the Federal Protective Service. That is the federal agency that is to guard federal buildings like courthouses. They are not doing immigration enforcement, but they will do security. And their uniforms are, again, it's dark on top and it'll say police, but it'll also say Homeland Security, or it'll say FPS on it. And there's also a variety of federal agencies that have been deputized by the federal government in order to do immigration enforcement. And that includes agencies such as the FBI, the DEA, the U.S. Marshals, the Department of Prisons. And so you may also find folks doing immigration enforcement with those logos. It's important to stay attuned to the logos on their uniforms, and also to, again, ask for identification or ask them to identify themselves if you are unsure. You may have also heard about the National Guard and the Marines in Los Angeles. Because they were not invited by the California governor, they are limited in terms of the policing and immigration enforcement that they are allowed to do. Federal troops on domestic soil do have limited powers. They can do things like traffic flow, they can protect the federal buildings, but they cannot detain or arrest anyone unless it's in self-defense or in extreme circumstances. Two more federal agencies to know about are HSI and CBP. HSI stands for Homeland Security Investigations, and they are the federal agency that does most of the workplace enforcement. So as you'll see, their uniforms are dark on top and typically jeans or plain clothes on bottom. And they use, again, a suburban or an unmarked vehicle, usually an SUV. And sometimes it will, again, have a logo that it identifies themselves as HSI, but a lot of times it doesn't as well. Homeland Security investigations are in charge of transnational criminal investigations and also international students. And so a lot of the reports that we've heard about workplace raids, it would be HSI that is actually the agency that is doing those raids. CBP, Customs and Border Protection or Border Patrol, are the people that are doing immigration enforcement at ports of entry, like airports and the borders, as well as 100 miles within any U.S. border, which includes our coasts. So Customs and Border Patrol, their region of enforcement in California actually encompasses the vast majority of the state. Technically, ICE would be doing enforcement in the interior of the United States, whereas CBP would be doing it at our borders. But in California, there's a lot of overlap between their jurisdiction. So both these entities, HSI and CBP, are doing immigration enforcement. CBP, they wear all green uniforms, and they would have a van that's all white with that green stripe on it, and it says Border Patrol on the car. In contrast, and the reason that we're showing you this is because we want to combat misinformation. This is what non-immigration enforcement police look like. While there are many reports of immigration enforcement identifying themselves as police without clarifying that they're also immigration officers, police are dressed differently than immigration officers. Traditionally, city police are dressed in all blue, top and bottom, and their cars will be black and white. Whereas county sheriffs, so the police officer for a county, are wearing tan on top and dark or green on bottom. And again, black and white vehicles that would name and have the logo of the city on it and have the name of the sheriff on it. And then California Highway Patrol, which monitors our highways, they're wearing beige top and bottom, and again, black and white vehicles. While we do see ICE frequently identify themselves as police without clarifying, and as well identify themselves in or only wear civilian clothes and non-uniforms, everyone has a right to ask them to identify themselves, and you can ask them for a business card as well, which many of them carry. Now let's talk about your requirements as a business related to immigration. And that starts with the Form I-9. The Form I-9 is the document that verifies somebody's eligibility to work in the United States. It applies to employees and not independent contractors, and it's only for people working on U.S. soil. It's not required for anyone, though, that is doing casual domestic work, on an erratic or sporadic basis in a private home. So, for example, somebody who's babysitting on a casual basis would not be required to do this, but any business that has employees would have to do this for every single employee. This is a form that most folks are familiar with. There's a portion that the employer fills out, and there's a portion that the employee fills out as well. And there's an ability to do this online with E-Verify as well. But if you are not, if you're reviewing documents remotely, you must use E-Verify. But if you're reviewing the documents in person, you're not required to use E-Verify, and you don't have to keep copies of the documents. And by copies of the documents, I do mean like a copy of their passport. So what would your obligations be with respect to the I-9 process? You have to complete this process within the first 3 days of somebody's hiring, meaning their first day of pay. And the only thing that you have to do as the employer is confirm that the documents reasonably appear to be genuine and that they relate to the employee, meaning they don't obviously appear to be fake documents and they are not clearly related to somebody completely different, a completely different name. And you're not required to independently verify the veracity of any of their documents. You don't have to prove that their passport is a real passport. And then if they work for less than 2 years, you have to keep the documents, the I-9 original form for at least 3 years from their first day of employment. And if they work more than 2 years, you keep it for 1 year after they stop working for you. After that point, you are able to shred those records and no longer keep them. And so we have an opportunity for participation in the chat if you'd like. This is a question that we get often. So let's say that you have an employee that has work authorization through DACA, Deferred Action for Childhood Arrivals. And when they are hired, indicate that their work authorization expires on September 1st. Do you, as the employer, have an obligation to re-verify their employment? And I'll take a moment and folks can put in the chat whether they think the answer is yes or no. I'm seeing a lot of yeses, and you are correct. So if the standard is whether you know that this person is not authorized to work, then you would be required to re-verify. So if you know that after September 1st, 2025, this person is no longer authorized to work, you would have to follow up with this person ahead of time or on that date in order to request new documentation that would ensure their continued eligibility to work in the United States. If they don't have continuing eligibility to work in the United States, you would have to put them on leave or temporarily not have them on your payroll until that time that they are able to present new documentation that they have continuing eligibility to work. Let's talk about what an audit is and what a raid is. Let's first talk about briefly what an audit is, and we'll get into more detail in the next slide. An audit is when the United States government gives you 3 days notice through a notice of inspection that they want to review documents that you have in your possession. These include things like your payroll documents, your business licenses, and it's to confirm that all of your information is up to date and that all of your employees are authorized to work in the United States. This contrasts with a raid, which is where there is no notice, and this can happen from a variety of reasons. For example, a tip, if your bank flags to the government that you have you're paying a lot of your employees in cash, that can be a trigger. And a lot of times they are also doing surveillance of businesses or want to come around and do an educational visit for your staff and then find other evidence of wrongdoing, which they want to pursue. The raid, they would in advance secure all of the exits, and they would proceed with completing arrests and taking documents. In this case, they would have had a judicial warrant issued ahead of time that says that they are empowered to enter into your private facility. In this case, it's important to ask for that warrant to be able to see if there is a scope limited in that warrant, meaning they are only allowed by the court to enter certain areas of your facility or to take certain documents. You should contact legal counsel immediately, record and document everything, which we'll talk about more a little bit later. And you do not have to give any additional permission beyond what the warrant says for them to talk to your employees, to sort people by immigration status, or do any additional things beyond what is legally required. Everyone has a right to remain silent and may refuse to answer questions. Everyone also individually can also ask for a lawyer and sign anything without a lawyer present. Let's talk a little bit. Can somebody please remove this person from the chat? Let's talk more about I-9 audits. So an I-9 audit is different from the raid because you have advanced notice. So they give you a paper either in the mail or delivered personally that is a request for production of documents. And sometimes they will serve this in person and ask to waive the 3 days of notice, in which case they would be able to inspect your documents immediately. We would recommend not waiving this notice period to give yourself enough time to gather all of the documents, to get all of your files in order, and to be able to have time to contact legal counsel. Things that they might be looking for would be the list of employees, your payroll, your business licenses. What will happen next is that you can either go in person to the ICE office to deliver the documents, your lawyer will handle it, or ICE will come back to review the documents. We would recommend taking the documents off-site to ICE directly to avoid releasing any other information in the course of that visit. If they find any violations, meaning unauthorized workers or errors in the documents, they will give you 10 days to remedy the issue, meaning to provide updated documents. And then there can be penalties if you have incorrect documents that range from hundreds of thousands to thousands of dollars, depending on the severity of the violation. You should educate all of your staff that as soon as they get any information from immigration authorities, they should talk to you right away. You don't need to give your consent to speak with any officers there. And under California law, you are also required to post a notice that says that you are being audited and to let the affected employees know about the audit. If they do find unauthorized employees at your organization, you are going to be required to fire those employees until that time that they have proper work authorization. I'm now going to pass it back to Ritu.
Thank you, Sophia. I know this is a lot of information, and I do see people are using the chat, the Q&A to ask questions. Thank you. And what I'm going to be speaking about now will cover one of the attendees' questions. So it's important as we have conversations about our rights and responsibilities in this area, it's important to distinguish between public and private spaces, and all have protections against unreasonable searches and seizures. Which means that when any law enforcement agent or immigration agent wants to enter private areas of places, where we work or live, they need to have a judicial warrant. And the determination of what is private versus public is based on a few factors. So in terms of what's private, it needs to really be an area where we all would have a reasonable expectation of privacy, both subjectively and objectively. And so there's some, areas where we can all agree that we have an expectation of privacy, such as our home, our office in our workplace, the bathroom. But then there's also areas where, we can't reasonably expect to have privacy, such as the street, the sidewalk, the park. And then there are a bunch of gray areas. So just to give an example, at Public Counsel, we own the building in which our office is located. We have a lobby, and we do consider our lobby to be private. And there's a few reasons for that, which I'll go into, but a lot of our clients, of course, have lobbies too, and they aren't private. And the reason our lobby is considered private, and we have a strong argument for that, is our doors are always closed. In order to get entry into our building, you have to have a key card if you're an employee and you have to scan it, or you have to buzz in and the receptionist will ask for your name and confirm that you are an employee and open the door for you. If you're a client with an appointment, the door will also be open for you by the receptionist. Otherwise, the door will not be open for you. And we also have signs on the front door that say private, authorized personnel only. And so for those reasons, because, the signs alone aren't enough, but in addition to the signs, because our practices are also following this pattern of creating a private space, because we don't just let anybody in. And for a lot of our clients, that's not the case. Like, their lobbies are technically open for anybody to come in and out of. Some of our clients, for example, do have buzzers at their front doors, but literally anybody can press the button and the door will open. So in that case, your lobby will be public. Now, what that means is then, it may be easier for immigration agents to get into your lobby, right? Because they, just like any person from the public, can gain access. But it doesn't then mean that once they're in your lobby, they now have the right to go into the private parts of your facility without a judicial warrant. Next slide, please. Okay, so I want to talk briefly about why it's important to have a policy for you or your staff to follow if immigration agents show up at your facility. Next slide, please. Okay, so having a policy can train staff for unexpected and stressful situations. It can help protect your clients' and organizations' legal rights, and it encourages discussion and agreement within the organization and communicates that, you have a plan in place and you're doing what you can to keep immigrants welcome and safe. Next slide, please. So we have created template policies for organizations to use in the event of law enforcement or immigration agent activity at their facilities. We will share that with you, the template, and you can adapt it to your needs and based on, the size and nature of your organization. But these policies usually have different components to them. So there's a scope, there's the information about the type of employees you have. There might be information on your company's data collection and preservation rules, the practices you have regarding monitoring and receiving visitors, and what exactly is going to be done if law enforcement shows up. Next slide, please. So as to scope, basically the policy should be clear about which facilities does the policy apply to. So does it apply to your main office? Does it apply to satellite offices? List out all the locations where it applies. And then you're also going to talk about the different types of staff you have, and what their duties are. Because as we mentioned, ICE may show up and identify themselves as police. Next slide, please. So this is a screenshot from one of our sample policies just to give you an idea of what it looks like. And as it starts off with the purpose, and then it'll go into the scope and the different roles and what to do if the agents show up. Next slide, please. Okay, so in drafting your policy, as I said, this distinction between public and private spaces is very important. So you need to think about what is our policy around taking in visitors, right? It's possible, even if your business is generally open to the public, that you might be able to create spaces within it that are private. And to do that, you want to use signs and you want to implement practices that, regulate who's coming in and out of those private parts of your business, such as the kitchen or office within your business. Also, remember that if things are just laying around in your business, like confidential client or staff information, then theoretically, if ICE agents get access to your business, they also will be able to look at that information and seize it under the plain view rule. So do your best to not have client records and staff records in the open. Make sure that you're following procedures to keep those kind of documents and information stored away. And remember, generally, yes, these agents do need a judicial warrant to enter private spaces, but if you consent to them entering your private spaces, that's an exception to them needing a warrant. Next slide, please. Okay, this is the last one for me. I wanted to quickly touch on harboring and obstruction of justice because we have heard from folks that are, scared of being charged with harboring or obstructing justice. And so I'm just going to clarify what these things are. So harboring and aiding and abetting, this is generally affirmative conduct, such as providing shelter, transportation, and direction to individuals about how to obtain false documentation or to give them warnings about impending investigations. All of this in an effort to facilitate a person continuing to be here illegally. Merely renting a room or apartment to somebody, who may be undocumented is not enough to constitute harboring, for example. Then the other thing, folks need to be aware of is obstruction of justice. Obstructing an officer in the performance of their official duties is what's called obstruction of justice. So this includes if you were to physically block ICE agents, provide false information, or use intimidation to prevent an arrest. I'm going to pass it back to Sophia. We don't have a ton of time, but we definitely want to share tips with you on what you can do if these agents show up.
Thank you, Ritu. So first, you're going to think about when you encounter law enforcement or immigration, that you should not be lying to them. It's a separate federal crime to lie to a federal agent. So either your staff should follow your established policy or they should remain silent. Your policy should also state that law enforcement or immigration enforcement should not be allowed to enter without a judicial warrant. This prevents the unnecessary disclosure of private information and keeps your employees safe. Additionally, you should designate certain staff members who have a higher level of training to read a warrant and to interact with immigration or law enforcement directly, who should be the only ones interacting with them, so that other staff are empowered to say that they're not authorized to speak with them and to centralize the communication through somebody who has more training to interact with them. So if they are already at the door, the first thing you would do is to stay calm and not run. Running away from a federal officer can give them evidence or proof that you've committed some sort of wrongdoing. And then whoever is in contact with them first would contact that person that you've authorized to speak with them to come out and speak with them, or you might have to ask them to wait until that person can arrive. Anyone who's not authorized would then say you do not have permission to enter non-public areas, and to please remain in these designated areas. So for example, they're not allowed to enter the private areas of your business, but they can stay outside on the public sidewalk. Then the authorized person would inspect whatever documentation they have provided, whether that's a warrant, a subpoena, whether it's a notice of inspection for an audit, and verify whether it's a legitimate document, what it's asking us specifically. If they don't provide any documentation, which has been happening as well, then you would say that you have a policy of denying access without a valid judicial warrant, and you would ask them to kindly leave. If they do have a valid warrant, you would double check it, and then you would make sure that you're looking at the scope which the warrant itself would identify, and limit their search or their arrest only to the scope of that warrant. So for example, if it says they can inspect Suite 202 or this specific address, you're going to go with them and accompany them the whole time. And if they try to inspect areas that are outside of the scope of that warrant, you would kindly let them know that they are outside of the scope, but you would not interfere, and you would document the entire time as well, either with your phone or taking notes. So what can those non-authorized staff do in the meantime? They can direct the agents, the officers, to that authorized person. They can let them know that they're not authorized to speak with them, and they can document the interaction if they feel comfortable as well. They should not be consenting to their entry or a search. As mentioned, the exception to the requirement to have a warrant is consent. So if I give permission to the officers to come inside my office, they are allowed to come in now without any further documentation. I should not be providing them any information or documents that are not specifically required by the warrant, or engaging in any unnecessary conversation. If they ask, for example, if somebody is here this day, you're not going to lie to them, or give them any unnecessary information. You can just tell them again that you're not authorized to speak with them and that they can speak to the authorized person. You would not physically interfere, make any false statements, or obstruct them in any way. And you should not direct people nearby that they shouldn't speak to them. So as Ritu mentioned, there's those harboring or obstruction charges. And so you should not be letting folks know to not engage, but you can tell everyone they have a right to remain silent more generally, and everyone has a right to not answer questions, but don't direct people nearby. I know I'm at time, but I'm going to quickly move through this last couple slides. Just about documentation, stay a safe distance away and try to focus your recording on the agents and not others nearby. And then we have a sample documentation report that we can share with folks. And you're just gathering all of the information, the names, how many officers, their badge numbers, any documentation provided. It's also a good practice to put your phone horizontally to capture more of the action rather than the sky or the ground. And this is a sample of this template that we have. The top line takeaways are to not touch them or physically interfere, to notify these authorized folks, request to see a warrant, and if you don't have a warrant, no access and no information, contact legal counsel and document everything. After the raid, this can be a very disturbing and morale-breaking event. It's important to provide a space to debrief. If folks are detained, it's important to pay their wages and benefits promptly. And this is a good idea here to have a process to update all of your employees' personnel files with the most recent address in the case that you need to mail their last paycheck home with them. You can provide a reference to them and stay connected to the community's immigration response. For example, by connecting to your local rapid response network. This is a website link that lists all of the rapid response networks, and those are folks that you can call in the event that ICE is completing a raid at your workplace, and those folks will go out and help you document the interaction. We have some additional resources here, and we will share all of these resources with the slides after the fact. Here's also Public Counsel's phone number and our email addresses should you need additional support. And with that, I am going to pass it back to Isaiah and Bianca for the Q&A.
Awesome. Thank you. Thank you so much, Sophia. And one, I want to say that this information is super helpful and super beneficial. Ritu, thank you so much as well for sharing this information. And all the attendees, thank you for your patience. I know we had some technical difficulties, but thank you for your patience in the process. And so as we open it up for Q&A, please feel free to put your questions in the Q&A box, and we will rattle off the questions as they come. We do have Max Norris, who's an attorney from the California Labor Commission's office, and he will join us for the Q&A section as well to help provide some solutions and answers to some of you all's questions. So I think I'll start. And Sophia, Ritu, if we encounter a raid, are we in our legal right to close our business doors as a grocery market?
Ritu, yes, are you on mute? Go ahead.
Yeah, I mean, so I guess my question would be, are they already in your, store, or you just know that they're in the area? Like if you know that they're in your neighborhood and you are worried for yourself or for your customers, you could, close the doors and not let anybody in or out. I think where it gets tricky is like if you plan to be open for that day and have customers come in, how are you going to screen who's coming in and out if you're trying to keep the doors closed and private? The other thing to note, because I don't know if this person is also asking this, but if you know that ICE agents are in the community or in the neighborhood or outside, but you don't know who they're there for, you could, alert people in your store that, agents are outside and they could leave if they want to. But also you could, if you have a private part of your facility, you could have folks go into that private room, to which agents would need a judicial warrant to enter. And that, so something to think about. Yeah. So I don't know if that answers your question. Let us know if you have a follow-up.
Yeah, and just would add, like, you as a business owner have full rights to open and close your business whenever you want to already, right? So if you're sick one day, you can close your business for any reason. And if you feel unsafe, again, you can close your business. Yeah, we just advise not to tell people nearby to flee or to advise people to hide, but you can advise them of the information as as it's happening, so that folks can make the best decision for themselves.
Sophia, that last piece that you touched on, it leads in with one of the questions that we received about if ICE comes with a judicial warrant, so they have a specific name of an employee. What are the obligations for the employer to take them to that specific person, or is it just, are we focusing on whether they have access to the site? What does an employer need to do in that situation?
Yeah, we didn't go a ton in depth on this, but it depends on what the warrant says. So, for example, if it's an arrest warrant, it would not permit the agents to enter your private business. It would only authorize them to enter the individual's private home if they have reason to believe that the individual is there at home. So you're within your rights to deny them entry into your business and to not answer any of their questions. But for example, if the warrant does list the business name as a place to be searched, or if it specifically specifies, for example, if you have a residential facility that you're running, and it's listing one apartment for this individual to be arrested, you may, for the reason of safety, want to let them in and access just that apartment to be able to limit the scope just to that apartment and limit collateral arrests or further privacy invasions to other folks that are also living there. This would be a determination that you would have to make for yourself in that moment, but that would be determined by looking at what the document itself says that you need to do and by a risk analysis of other folks and collateral arrests of people nearby.
Okay, thank you. Very helpful.
So we do have an I-9 question, and Sophia, I saw you beginning to answer it. And so, who is responsible for completing and maintaining I-9 forms when we use a staffing agency? Is it us or the agency? It's a two-part question, and are we liable if the temp agency makes mistakes on their I-9s?
Yeah, so I'm sorry, Ritu.
No, you go ahead.
I can start to answer and then Ritu if you want to fill in also. But yeah, ultimately every business is responsible for their own I-9s. If you are hiring and employing somebody, you are responsible for making sure that their I-9 paperwork is completed properly. So if the temp agency makes mistakes, those mistakes can make your business liable.
All right, and then we have another question here around audit. So if somebody's subject to an audit and they're preparing the documents, they notice, let's say an I-9 is missing. Maybe that employee is out though. Let's say they're out on vacation or PTO during that time. What, if anything, should be done? And maybe you can just speak generally to, when they're gathering their documents for an audit, what should be done if they're discovering either errors or missing forms I-9?
Yeah, so if you discover a missing I-9, you should work to get that I-9 paperwork done as soon as possible, and you can just date it the date that you complete it, and then you can just note that the person started work on a certain day. You'd probably also need to collect information indicating that they're authorized to work for the entire length of their employment. I feel like I'm missing part of the question. Oh, they're out on PTO. Yeah.
Yeah.
Go ahead.
Hopefully that doesn't happen, but if it does, because if an I-9 audit is conducted by ICE, and there's an error found or some irregularity, they're gonna typically give you 10 days to fix it. But if it were me and I know somebody's out, like I would just explain to them the situation, like this person's out on leave, and so can we get an extension on that 10-day? You know, just try your best to see what you can do to get more time to fix the irregularity. I guess if they absolutely won't give you time, you could put this person on some kind of temporary leave until they're back and you're able to get the proper paperwork from them.
Awesome. Great questions coming through. And so I do want to honor time. It's 2:00, but there are a lot of great questions coming through. And so we are going to extend for another 3 to 5 minutes. If you have any questions, please feel free to put them in the chat. I do see a question that's not in the chat, but I do want to acknowledge it. What if you're a farm that's open to the public to buy products? I'm not sure if there was an additional or an add-on to that, Sophia or Raitu, but that was a question that did come through the chat.
Yeah,
Yeah.
I mean,
Go ahead, Ritu.
yeah, I mean, if it's open to the public, of course it's harder, right, to then argue that ICE agents shouldn't be there, or it's harder to keep them out, basically. So they could theoretically come and go onto the farm. There's ways to try to make farms more private. Like we did a training for agricultural businesses a couple weeks ago. But again, it's not, you could put up a fence, you could have signage that says it's private, you can monitor who's allowed in and out. That would help to make the area private. But I know that's not feasible for everyone. And I'll just add that if you are truly in a place that's more public where, you can't really make it private, in that case, the best thing we can do is make sure that people that are going to be coming and going know what their rights are by having red cards available, for them that list out their rights, and having rapid response numbers on hand that, can be called if there is an ICE sighting.
I also wanted to clarify quickly about the staffing agency question. So you're required to verify whenever somebody is employed by you. So what they're an employee. You're not required to verify if somebody's just an independent contractor. A lot of times there's a lot of misclassification of employees as independent contractors, and I'm sure Max could talk a lot more about that distinction as well. But in the case that they're not actually an employee, they're just an independent contractor, you're not required to independently verify. That would be on the staffing agency who has employed them. I think maybe we have time for one more question.
Yes, let's do one more question. Let's see. And again, these slides will be emailed out to you. Let's see. We do have a few I-9 questions. There are quite a few I-9 questions. What if an employee was hired before an I-9 was required? Do we have to have an I-9?
If it is an employee, you need to have an I-9. Yeah, in order to comply with the law. Yes.
Yeah, so if they don't have one already, you would need to complete it now. And you would need to ensure that they had valid work authorization for the entire length of their employment with you.
I do want to ask one more question. If I shows up to a restaurant with a warrant to search for documents and individuals, what should the non-target individuals do? For example, what should we tell customers and or other employees?
Yeah, we covered this a little bit during the presentation, but in general, the employees and other folks nearby should try to avoid interacting as much as possible and leave the interacting to the authorized representatives or people that have additional training in order to interact with them. For example, they should, just move to the side, out of the way of the investigation, and they can remain silent. They can also not answer any of the questions if they don't want to answer them. They should not be giving consent to any documents or any private areas without the authorized representative's approval. They can tell other customers nearby what's happening. They can let them know that ICE is at the building or law enforcement, and keep them updated on what's happening. And then they can also let customers know that you're trying to preserve their safety and privacy, and that you're working on resolving the situation, and that they have a right to remain silent and to refuse to answer questions.
Awesome. Well, it's 2:05, and I want to go ahead and conclude this. There are many questions still left in the chat, and I will put a link for everyone in the chat. If you do have any follow-up questions, feel free to click the link and ask your question, and we will make sure that we connect with you and answer any question that you may have as soon as possible. I want to thank all of our partners here on the line from Public Counsel, GO-Biz, the California Chamber of Commerce, the Small Business Policy Council for this timely webinar. I want to thank all of our participants for taking part in today's webinar. And because of your boldness, your resiliency, and entrepreneur spirit, California is the fourth largest economy in the entire world. And our hope is that this information is fruitful for you, for your personal safety, for your employee safety, and also for your small business success. And so if you did not get your question answered, feel free to connect with us on that link, ask your question, and we will reach out to you as soon as possible and answer that as best as we can. Thank you so much for everyone participating, our expertise, our experts on the line. Thank you again. And again, these slides will be sent out via email. So with that being said, thank you all for participating and joining. God bless.
Thank you.